So here we are with Kelly O'Brien, class of 2007. So Kelly, tell us about your time at LBC. You were a secondary ed student?
Yeah, so I actually started off as a music major for one semester. It was fun, but decided no on that really fast. Music theory classes, for anybody who's ever sat in them, are crazy. But I always had a really big interest in history, so I switched over my second semester, my freshman year, to be history secondary ed. Because I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, so I just had to figure out exactly what subject I wanted to settle into. When I was getting my certification back in 2007, the state certified instead of social studies, we were citizenship education. So most of my classes were paired with I have history classes and political science classes, along with the liberal arts ones there. And I always look back fondly at my time at LBC, for a variety of reasons. Most of our best friends are from Lebanon Valley, so we're 14 years out now, but we get together with our friends and now families. Everybody's got kids and stuff. Most of them are from Lebanon Valley. I'm sure a lot of students watching this can sympathize with that, making really close relationships. And I met my husband, James, at LBC as well, freshman year, and so we've been married almost 14 years coming up. And I just loved the class sizes and the fact that everything was very personalized. I felt like sometimes it was some work because you had to make sure you read every single book because with a group of 8 students you can't hide. But that was good because we had great discussions. I think I became much more academic, much more open to a lot of different points of learning that I hadn't gotten in my much smaller rural high school. So I'm really thankful for LBC for opening me up to that kind of experience in undergraduate.
Cool. And so what happened when comes the day you graduate? Tell us about your job search process.
Yeah, so I started looking for teaching jobs in the spring, before graduation, and my now husband then was going to law school, so we decided we were going to stay in Pennsylvania. So I was applying in schools around Harrisburg. I got a year-long term sub position at Mechanicsburg High School, and it was a great job there, but they didn't have anything the following year. But then I was hired at Cumberland Valley, which is a really large suburban high school down in Mechanicsburg, not too far from here. It's 45 minutes or so. But I did have a kind of a long commute for about 7 years while I worked at that school. And it was a great experience working there in the public school. I had some larger class sizes, as most people know, especially now, in public schools, we're seeing class sizes of 30 to 35. But the students there were great, and I made a lot of relationships with students who are now, I have students who are now in their 30s, which is insane for me to think about, since I started teaching at 22, and I was 23 when I started there. And it's, it's a great place and great academic atmosphere. In 2015, I switched gears and I moved to Milton Hershey School, which is a private school, right down the road in Hershey. And it's funny because even though we lived right here in Lebanon for so long, I wasn't that familiar with it. But then I had a student. I had actually been an adjunct for a little bit at LBC, and I had a student who was an adult becoming a teacher, and he worked at the Milton Hershey School, and that's when I found out about them. And the school, its mission is to serve students from situations of poverty and break the cycle of poverty. And so I really thought that was a great mission and a place I might want to seek to work in the future. So I moved there in 2015. I started off teaching 9th graders, which most people know teaching 9th graders is like being in the trenches, much like teaching any middle schooler. But it's fine. The kids, keep you on your feet and everything. I taught American cultures, and it's funny because a lot of social studies teachers, they want to teach American cultures, or for me, I feel like that's just kind of like the skimming the surface, the bland stuff. So I was happy when 2 years later I started teaching government and economics, as well as an elective African American history course. Especially that elective course has become really my I'll call it my baby, because I've done so much work building it up. I'm always researching, finding new content. I see it as my responsibility to, add, all the voices that I can, all the literature that I can, all the media that I can to help students, understand, especially the current situations that have been happening in last year. It's such a relevant course. We've had great enrollment in the course as well, which shows how much students want to be part of that conversation. I also, after graduation, a few years later, I went back to get my master's degree. As a teacher, typically that's paid for by your school district. I got my American Studies master's degree in 2018. It took me a little bit. My husband always kind of makes fun of me for it, but part of that process, we adopted 2 kids out of foster care, 2 daughters. Our daughters Maya and Bella. So I'll give myself a little leeway on not having finished that instantly. So we have 2 wonderful girls that we adopted 3 years ago now.
You also did a proper master's degree with research and
Yeah,
stuff rather than
as an education major, you can either go back and get a degree in in education, which I think can be valuable in learning new pedagogy and other things. But I really wanted a content degree, so mine focused in race and ethnicity, which I think really contributed to my content that I teach. Just my again my worldview, expanding it more from my undergrad. So it was really valuable in that way. And in fact, right now I'm applying for a doctoral program to the University of Illinois it's called Diversity and Equity in education. So it's really focusing on those issues of marginalized groups and how they experience the educational atmosphere. So I'm very excited about starting that hopefully by next spring.
That's really awesome. So do you think that LVC prepared you for when you were out working as a high school teacher?
Yeah, definitely. And so when it comes to the career of teaching, which everybody always jokes, like if you can't do something you can teach or something. I can't remember what the phrase is. But when it comes to it, I think what I needed coming into it as a 23-year-old coming out of undergrad was content knowledge, and so I gained a lot of that. And I also gained, research skills, and I gained, the skills of what it means to be in a classroom and have discussions. A lot of things that maybe I didn't see as much in my own high school, and so that was great. Now, on the other hand, some things you just can't prepare for. You just have to kind of grow into as a teacher when it comes to classroom management and how you make relationships with your students and how you work with your colleagues. I've worked with some people that are just wonderful to plan with, and we can in our content area we just do great things, and I've worked with some people that a little more difficult, but what workplace doesn't have that. So you kind of learn how to engage with different people, both your students and your colleagues and your administrators, the people who are overseeing your work, and those are the things you just kind of learn as you go along the way. You can't prepare for those necessarily in undergrad. Although I did a really great student teaching experience as well over at Cornwall, Lebanon, Cedar Crest High School, where I was given a lot of liberty to plan my own lessons, to engage with the class. It wasn't like I was just like the assistant teacher. So that also was really good for preparing me.
So how has teaching changed in the time that you've been at it?
Well, it's interesting because here we are interviewing a year after the pandemic, and a lot of people would say technology is the biggest thing, and it's not only our technology that we're using with the students, but it's how our students have a relationship with technology. Even when I started teaching in 2007, and then going into Cumberland Valley in 2008, hardly any students had cell phones, but they just weren't using them as much. They weren't on social media as much. I would say we were much more used to the paper atmosphere. Heck, I was using a overhead projector, which most of you watching this probably don't know what an overhead projector is. But I mean, in that way, our relationship with technology was very limited, and now there has to be this understanding of how we use it in class, how my students use technology outside of class, just like my own kids, and my daughters are 11 and 14, and I can see how engaged they are in TikTok and God knows Instagram, whatever else they're on, and just you have to say to yourself as a teacher, how can I engage my students both with technology but also as real people, as real humans in the classroom, because that's so important. I think all of us really came to an understanding of that last year when we were separated completely from our students, and we were like, oh yeah, we can use computers, we can use technology, this is fine. But then we realized how much that in-person learning matters, and how much discussions matter, seeing each other's faces matter, So it's just kind of finding that balance between the tools that we have and, but also there's an academic relationship that is really important when it comes to school and making human beings that want to go out into the world and be productive. So,
That's cool.
uh,
So what advice would you have for people who are history majors and doing their SED certification?
I think just be open to, like as you're going out and applying for jobs, be open to starting off, possibly anywhere, different locations might have different jobs open and stuff. One thing I have learned, because I've taught in suburban public school, I've taught in private school, which has, is much more diverse and obviously students with more needs, is that kids are kids and teenagers are teenagers no matter where you go and no matter what situation they're from, and all of them have different needs, but all of them desire the teacher to be there for them in some capacity, even if they don't show it. Teenagers are interesting in the way that they show their needs, and I think just anybody who's going into this career has to say to themselves, I'm here to be a purveyor of information, but I'm also here to be someone who cares for the students that I'm going to be with every day, because you're there, 6-7 hours a day with kids, and it's a great job in that way.
So can you expand on that or give an example of that? Because that's a great insight, and I think I struggle with that myself, because I think of myself more as a purveyor. I mean, I care, but then it's always hard. It's hard for me to know sometimes if the various ways that people are either needing you or reaching out, and sometimes they're just like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think on just a daily basis, it's just I remember when I first started teaching, administrators were all about when the bell rings, you start teaching, and you go, and you just go, and now we're kind of coming more to an understanding. We call it social emotional learning of okay, take some time with your students to see how their days are going, to see what's going on. If you notice something your kids are going through, maybe not right in the moment in front of all the rest of the students, but take them aside, talk to them about it, which I think any good teacher, that should be a no-brainer. But what I've learned is, all the relationships that I have with graduates who, I teach a lot of upper class, I teach 10th through 12th grade primarily, so a lot of those graduates will stay in contact with me, is that although I'd love for them to remember every single detail of information that I've shared with them, and they often do remember some things. I'll have students say oh, I took a Black History course in college, and we talked about the new Jim Crow, and I already knew all about it, and none of my classmates did, and that that makes you feel good. But in the long run, most of the students remember my classroom and remember being there with their other students, and the fact that they were comfortable there, they were happy there, that, and that's what they remember. I mean, we were just in Puerto Rico, and I literally saw a student that I taught 13 years ago, and I joked about him. I joked to him, because I taught him government. I said, everything you know about the 3 branches you learned from me. He's like, yeah, sure, whatever. but I could tell that he remembered my classroom. He remembered me, and that was crazy. That I hadn't seen him in 13 years, and he caught me in the middle of the street in Puerto Rico. So that's the type of thing that's really important education, is those relationships. So.
Mm-hmm. So what other kinds of advice do you have for students, either in terms of managing their social media, or purging their social media in some cases, in terms of either how to, and the SED certification doesn't leave a whole lot of room for exploration, at least in classes, although for some it does. So just anything from.
Sure, yeah. I would say, have grit. One of the things I remember from college is each semester being oh my gosh, there's so much work, and you're looking towards the end of the semester, you just want to get through, and then by the time it's all over, you're sad that college is over, because you're leaving and you have to go in the real world, where all your friends are not there, with you. But just take each semester as as it comes, and work hard. And one thing I think I got a lot better at reading when I was in college. When I was in high school, I was totally about the Cliff Notes and the Spark Notes. And I think I found out how valuable reading can be in terms of just, understanding a better worldview and specific, content. When people research something and they put it into a book, they know stuff, and you should know that too. And I just didn't appreciate that as a high schooler, and I hope people in college, undergraduates really take the books that are assigned to them and say what, obviously a professor assigns it. There's something valuable about that text that, they can learn from it. And, since I've graduated, I've really loved reading, and it's been the way that I've tried to gain more information from my classes that I teach, and just gain more information for myself and for my own knowledge of, of what's happening in the world. So, just, work hard and don't be afraid to learn stuff. It's not about just kind of skimming by and getting grades. It's about getting that stuff that you're going to use in the future.
That's cool.
Okay.
So I think we'll leave it there. That's awesome. So thanks.
Thank you.